The sky above Altheon Prime burned red and black. Commander Nari stood on the bridge of her warship, watching her world die. The screen showed the same terrible story over and over: ships exploding, cities burning, people screaming for help that would never come. "Commander, the Eastern Defense Line has collapsed," her officer reported. His voice shook. 3 billion civilians are trapped in the evacuation zones. Nari's hands gripped the command rail. She had fought in 30 battles across her long career. She had never lost. Until now. The enemy was unlike anything the Galactic Coalition had ever faced. They called it the Void Swarm. It consumed everything. It learned from every attack. It never stopped. "How long until the shields fail?" she asked. 6 hours. Maybe less. 6 hours. That was all the time left for 3 billion souls. Nari had already sent every ship, every soldier, every weapon. Nothing worked. The swarm adapted to their technology. It ate through their defenses like acid through paper. "Send one more transmission to Coalition Command," Nari said quietly. "Tell them we fought well. Tell them to remember us." Far across the galaxy, the Coalition Council met in emergency session. 12 species sat around the Great Table. They had ruled the stars for 10,000 years. They had never known true defeat. Until now. High Arbiter Velxus looked older than his 300 years. "We have lost 5 systems in 3 months. Our fleets are shattered. Our weapons are useless. Does anyone have a solution?" Silence filled the chamber. The greatest minds in the galaxy had no answers. They had tried everything. Plasma weapons, antimatter bombs, quantum disruptors. The swarm absorbed it all and grew stronger. A small voice spoke from the back. "I have an idea." Everyone turned. Chief Strategist Hyejin stood up. She was young for her position, barely 80 years old. Most considered her appointment a political favor. She spent her time studying ancient wars instead of modern tactics. "Speak," Velxus said. Hyejin walked to the center of the chamber. Her hands trembled, but her voice stayed steady. "We need to find the Terrans." The room erupted in laughter. Even in their darkest hour, the idea seemed absurd. "The Terrans are myths," General Vexer said, his multiple arms waving dismissively. "Stories we tell cadets. They never existed." "They existed," Hyejin said firmly. "I have spent 20 years studying the First Convergence War. The records are incomplete, but they are real. The Terrans fought alongside us 5 centuries ago. Then they vanished." "Because they were destroyed," another council member said. "No." Hyejin activated a holographic display. Ancient text and images floated in the air. "Because we exiled them. The Terrans refused to follow our warfare protocols. They used tactics we called barbaric. Totalva. Psychological operations. Attacks that seemed insane. So we told them to leave or fight our way. They left." Velxus leaned forward. "Even if this is true, how does it help us now?" "The Terrans won every battle they fought," Hyejin said. "Every single one. Against enemies that outnumbered them. Against technology superior to theirs. They won because they refused to lose. They did whatever was necessary. And where are these mythical warriors now?" Vexer asked mockingly. Hyejin pulled up another image. Star charts filled the space above them. "I have found references to something called the Sanctuary Zone, a quarantined region of space. No one has entered it for 500 years. The coordinates match the last known location of the Terran fleet. You want us to send an expedition to find a myth?" Velxus said. "I want permission to go myself," Hyejin replied. "Give me a scout ship." "If I am wrong, you lose nothing. If I am right, we might survive." The council argued for hours. Finally, Velxus raised his hand for silence. "The council denies your request. We cannot waste resources on legends. You will remain here and help plan our defense." Hyejin bowed and left the chamber. But she did not go to her quarters. She went to the military shipyard. 2 days later, a small scout ship vanished from the Coalition fleet. Security reported it stolen. By the time they identified the thief, Hyejin was already through the first jump gate. She traveled for 5 days through empty space. The Sanctuary Zone was far from any trade route or colony. Hyejin understood why the Coalition had forgotten about it. Out here, there was nothing but darkness and silence. On the 6th day, her sensors detected something. Her heart raced as she studied the readings. Ships, hundreds of them. Space stations. Orbital platforms, all bearing the same symbol, a blue and white emblem showing a planet called Earth. "This is impossible," Hyejin whispered. Her communication system screamed a warning. 3 warships appeared around her scout ship. They were massive, covered in weapons she did not recognize. A voice came through her speakers. "Unidentified vessel, you have entered Terran protected space. Power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. This is your only warning." Hyejin's hands flew across her controls. "This is Chief Strategist Hyejin of the Galactic Coalition. I come in peace. I am alone and unarmed." There was a long pause. Then the voice came again, different this time, calmer. "Coalition? We have not heard that name in a very long time. This is Captain Taeyang of the Terran Expeditionary Navy. State your purpose." "I need help," Hyejin said simply. "My people are dying. We are being destroyed by an enemy we cannot defeat. I have come to ask if the legends are true. I have come to ask if Terrans still know how to fight." Another pause. Longer this time. "Follow us," Taeyang said. "Keep your weapons powered down. If you make any aggressive move, we will destroy you. Do you understand?" "I understand." The 3 warships formed an escort around her tiny scout ship. They guided her deeper into the system. Hyejin's eyes widened as they approached a massive planet. The scanners showed billions of life signs, cities, farms, industrial complexes. An entire civilization that the galaxy thought was extinct. They brought her to an orbital fortress that dwarfed anything the Coalition had built. Hyejin's ship was pulled into a docking bay by tractor beams. As she stepped out, she saw armed soldiers waiting. They wore armor that looked ancient but functional. Their weapons were pointed at her. Captain Taeyang stood at the front. He was tall, with dark eyes that had seen too much war. "Welcome to New Earth, Strategist Hyejin. You have a lot of explaining to do." Hyejin looked at him and the soldiers behind him. These were not myths. These were not legends. These were warriors who had been waiting in the darkness for 500 years. "The Void Swarm has returned," she said, "just as your ancestors predicted." The Coalition did not listen then. "We are listening now. Will you help us?" Taeyang's expression did not change. "Come with me. The Admiral will want to hear this story." As they walked through the fortress, Hyejin saw something that made her blood run cold. Through the observation windows, she could see shipyards building warships, training grounds where soldiers practiced in conditions that would kill most species, weapons testing ranges that used technology the Coalition had banned centuries ago. The Terrans had not been idle during their exile. They had been preparing for war. The question was, would they fight for those who had cast them out? Admiral Sora sat behind a desk made of real wood, a luxury in a world of metal and plastic. She was older than Hyejin expected, with gray hair and scars across her face. But her eyes were sharp and clear. Those were the eyes of someone who had seen countless battles and survived them all. "Sit," Sora said, pointing to a chair. Hyejin sat. Captain Taeyang stood by the door, arms crossed, watching her carefully. "You say the Void Swarm has returned," Sora said. "Tell me everything." Hyejin spoke for an hour. She told them about the attacks. The billions dead, the fleets destroyed, the worlds consumed. She showed them data files and combat recordings. She held nothing back. When she finished, Sora was quiet for a long time. Finally, she stood and walked to the window. 500 years ago, my ancestors warned the Coalition about this threat. We had tracked the swarm's movement through deep space. We told them it would come eventually. Do you know what they said to us? "No, Admiral. They said we were warmongers. They said we invented threats to justify our violent nature. They said the galaxy was at peace and we could not accept it." Sora turned back to face her. "Then they gave us a choice. Fight their way or leave. We left." "I'm sorry," Hyejin said quietly. "Sorry does not bring back the lost years. Sorry does not undo the exile." Sora sat down again. "Why should we help people who cast us aside?" "Because innocent people are dying," Hyejin said. "Not the politicians who exiled you. Not the generals who mocked you. Civilians, children, people who do not even know your name. Is that not what warriors do? Protect those who cannot protect themselves?" Taeyang made a small sound. It might have been a laugh. "She has a point, Admiral." Sora looked at him. "You want to help them?" "I want to help the innocent," Taeyang said. "The Coalition command can burn for all I care. But those billions of people on Altheon Prime? They deserve a chance." Sora nodded slowly. "I will call the High Command. We will put it to a vote." The Terran High Command met that evening. 15 admirals and generals filled the conference room. They represented all of humanity's military forces. The debate was fierce. "We owe them nothing," one general said. "Let them fall. If we let them die, the swarm will keep coming. another admiral argued. Eventually it will reach us. Better to fight now while we have allies. Allies? They were never our allies. They were our jailers. That was 500 years ago. These are different people. Back and forth they argued. Hyejin waited outside the room with Taeyang. She could hear the raised voices through the walls. Will they help? She asked. I do not know, Taeyang admitted. We have prepared for war for 5 centuries. But we prepared to defend ourselves, not to save those who abandoned us. Then why did you argue for helping us? Taeyang looked at her. Because I am a soldier. Soldiers protect people. That is what we do. It does not matter if those people like us or not. The door opened. Sora stood there. The vote is finished. We will send a battle group. 5 warships. 2,000 Marines. You will lead us to your fleet. Hyejin felt hope for the first time in months. Thank you, Admiral. 5 warships may not sound like much, but 5 warships is all we will risk on people who may betray us again, Sora said coldly. If your coalition tries to restrict our tactics or question our methods, we leave. Immediately, those are the terms. I accept. You do not speak for the coalition. No, Hyejin agreed. But I will make them accept. I did not come all this way to fail now. The Terran battle group assembled over the next 2 days. Hyejin watched from the observation deck as the 5 warships took formation. They were smaller than coalition capital ships, but they moved with precision and purpose. She noticed something odd about their design. They had more armor in the front than the sides or back. Why is that? She asked Taeyang. We attack head-on, he said simply. We do not run, so we do not need armor in the back. Hyejin stared at him. That is insane. That is why we win. Before they left, Sora arranged for Hyejin to observe a training exercise. She wanted the strategist to understand what she was bringing to the coalition. Hyejin stood in a viewing gallery above a massive training ground. Below, 200 Terran Marines ran through combat drills. The conditions were brutal. Fires burned across the field. Explosions threw dirt and smoke into the air. Live ammunition cracked through the darkness. This will kill them, Hyejin said, horrified. Sometimes it does, a young officer named Daehyun said beside her. He was one of Taeyang's lieutenants. Last month we lost 3 soldiers in training. But that is 3 dead instead of 300 in real combat. We train like we fight. We fight to survive. On the field below, a squad of 10 Marines moved through burning rubble. Enemy drones fired on them with weapons set to stun, but powerful enough to break bones. Hyejin watched as one Marine took a hit and fell. His squad mates did not stop. They kept moving, completing their objective. Only after they secured the target did they go back for their fallen comrade. Why did they not help him immediately? Hyejin asked. Because the mission comes first, Daehyun explained. We do not leave people behind. But we do not throw away the mission to save one person. We finish the job, then we get everyone home. Later, Hyejin watched Marines practice combat in zero gravity. They used knives and close-range weapons in conditions where most species would be helpless. She watched them train in toxic environments wearing minimal protection. She watched them practice tactical withdrawals, learning when to retreat and regroup. Your people train to lose, she said to Daehyun. No, we train to survive losing. There is a difference. The coalition thinks war is about glorious victory. We know war is about doing whatever it takes to see tomorrow. Sometimes that means charging forward. Sometimes that means falling back. Sometimes that means sacrificing pieces to save the whole. That night, Hyejin could not sleep. She kept thinking about what she had seen. These were not the honorable warriors of coalition tradition. These were survivors. Brutal, efficient, terrifying survivors. The next morning, the Terran fleet departed for coalition space. The journey took 4 days. Hyejin spent the time learning everything she could about Terran warfare. She read their tactical manuals. She studied their history. She talked with the soldiers and officers. She learned that Terrans practiced something they called combined arms warfare. Every weapon, every soldier, every ship worked together as one system. When one part failed, the others adapted. Nothing was wasted. Everything had a purpose. She learned that Terrans did not believe in fair fights. If they had more firepower, they used it. If they were outnumbered, they used tricks and traps. Honor was a luxury. Survival was a necessity. Most importantly, she learned that Terrans never surrendered. Their military doctrine had no provisions for giving up. They fought until they won or until they died. There was no middle ground. When they finally reached Coalition space, Hyejin sent a message ahead. "This is Chief Strategist Hyejin. I am returning with Terran reinforcements. Do not fire on them. I repeat, do not fire." The response came from General Vexor himself. "You stole a ship and deserted your post. You will be arrested when you arrive, and your imaginary reinforcements will be—" His voice cut off. His sensors had just detected the Terran warships. "Those are Terran vessels," Vexor said, his voice different now, quieter. "How many?" "5 warships. 2,000 Marines," Vexor laughed. Not a happy laugh. A bitter, disappointed laugh. "You brought us 5 ships? We are losing entire fleets and you brought 5 ships?" Admiral Sora's voice came over the communication channel. "General Vexor, this is Admiral Sora of the Terran Expeditionary Navy. We are here to help." "Where do you need us?" "The world of Kryn's Hope," Vexor said. 2 billion refugees are trapped there. The swarm is overwhelming our defenses, but with only 5 ships— "Send us the coordinates," Sora interrupted. "We will handle it. You do not understand. We have 40 ships defending that world and we are still losing. What can 5 ships do?" "Watch," Sora said simply. "And learn." Kryn's Hope was dying. From orbit, Captain Taeyang could see the swarm spreading across the planet like a disease. Black masses of alien warriors covered entire continents. The sky was filled with their biofighters, organic ships that moved like insects. "Status," Taeyang said to his bridge crew. 40 coalition ships in defensive positions. They are holding a perimeter around the refugee camps. Barely. Swarm forces outnumber them 3 to 1. Ground forces report massive hive cores in the southern hemisphere. That is where the swarm is breeding more warriors. Taeyang studied the tactical display. The coalition was fighting a defensive battle, trying to hold their ground. They would lose. Defense let the enemy choose when and where to attack. Defense was slow death. "Admiral Sora," he said into the communication channel, requesting permission for direct insertion. "Into the hive cores?" Sora said. "That is suicide, Captain." "Yes, Admiral. It is." There was a pause. Then Sora laughed. "Permission granted. Try not to die too quickly. I hate writing condolence letters." "Understood, Admiral." Taeyang switched channels to address his strike team. 100 Marines waited in the drop pods. They knew what was coming. They had volunteered anyway. "Listen up," Taeyang said. "We are going straight into hell. The burning wastes. The hottest, deadliest part of the planet. That is where the swarm is strongest. That is where we are going." He pulled up images of their target. A massive organic structure rose from the ground like a tumor, the hive core. This was where the swarm created new warriors. Destroy it, and the swarm would lose its ability to replace losses. We drop in 5 minutes. Standard insertion. No extraction plan. We walk out or we do not walk out. Questions? Sergeant Yunji raised her hand. She was small but deadly, with more confirmed kills than anyone else in the company. "Are we bringing the big toys?" "Everything we have. Plasma charges, kinetic mines, neural disruptors. We are not here to play fair." A young private named Junho spoke up nervously. "Sir, the Coalition banned most of those weapons." "The Coalition is not here," Taeyang said flatly. "We are. Load everything." The drop pods launched 5 minutes later. They fell through fire and plasma, through clouds of swarm biofighters that tried to intercept them. Taeyang watched through his pod's view screen as 3 pods were destroyed, blown apart by enemy fire. 30 Marines dead in seconds. He felt nothing. There would be time to mourn later. If there was a later. His pod hit the ground so hard it cracked his visor. The door blew open and heat washed over him. The temperature outside was hot enough to melt steel. His armor's cooling system screamed warnings. Taeyang ignored them and ran forward. Around him, the surviving Marines formed a perimeter. Swarm warriors came at them immediately, massive creatures with claws and teeth. The Marines opened fire with everything they had. Hyejin watched from orbit, her hands gripping the armrests of her chair. She had insisted on staying with the Terran fleet to observe. Now she wished she had stayed on her ship. "This is insane," she whispered. "They will all die." "Probably," Admiral Sora said from the captain's chair. "But they will take the hive core with them." On the ground, Taeyang's team pushed forward through hell itself. The burning wastes lived up to their name. Rivers of lava cut across the landscape. The ground cracked and shifted under their feet. Volcanic gases choked the air, and everywhere the swarm attacked. Taeyang fired his weapon until it overheated. Then he drew his combat knife and fought hand to hand. Around him, his Marines did the same. They had trained for this. They had prepared for conditions that would kill normal soldiers. But preparation only went so far. This was beyond anything they had practiced. Sergeant Yunji led her squad through a collapsed building, using the rubble as cover. Swarm warriors followed them inside. Yunji triggered the charges she had planted, and the entire building came down, burying dozens of enemies. Her squad emerged from the other side, battered but alive. "Keep moving," Taeyang shouted. "The hive core is 2 kilometers ahead." 2 kilometers might as well have been 2 light years. The swarm threw everything at them. Warriors, flyers, burrowers that came up from underground. For every enemy they killed, 2 more appeared. Lieutenant Minho took a hit that tore through his armor. He fell, gasping as alien poison entered his bloodstream. His squad started to help him, but he waved them off. "Go," he choked out. "Complete the mission." "We do not leave people behind," his squad leader said. "You do when they are already dead," Minho said. He looked at his wounds. They were fatal. The poison would kill him in minutes. "Give me the nuclear charge. I will make sure the core goes down." The squad leader hesitated. Then she handed over the weapon. "It has been an honor, Lieutenant." "Terra endures," Minho said. The squad moved on. Behind them, Minho dragged himself toward the nearest hive core entrance. He would not live to see the mission complete, but he could take as many of the enemy with him as possible. Taeyang's force reached the main hive core 30 minutes later. They had started with 100 Marines. 57 remained. They were out of ammunition for their primary weapons. Their armor was cracked and failing, but they were still moving forward. The hive core was massive, a structure of organic material that pulsed with life. Inside, new swarm warriors were being created by the thousands. Taeyang could see them through the transparent walls, growing in pods, preparing to join the fight. "Plant the charges," he ordered. "Every entrance, every support structure. I want this thing to collapse completely." The Marines worked quickly, placing explosives throughout the complex. The swarm defended desperately. They knew what was happening. If the hive core fell, their advantage was lost. From orbit, Heejin watched the tactical display. The Terran position was surrounded by red markers representing enemy forces. There were thousands of them. The small blue cluster representing Taeyang's Marines was barely visible among the red. "They are surrounded," she said. "We need to send reinforcements." "No time," Sora said. "The coalition fleet cannot break through the swarm lines fast enough. Taeyang is on his own. Then they will die." "Probably," Sora said again. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were hard. "But the mission will succeed. That is what matters." On the ground, Taeyang finished planting the last charge. "Everyone out!" he shouted. "Run for the extraction point." The Marines ran. Behind them, the swarm pursued. Ahead of them, the desert stretched endlessly. There was no real extraction point. They were too far from any coalition position. But they ran anyway because that was what soldiers did. They fought until they could not fight anymore. 3 kilometers from the hive core, Taeyang triggered the detonator. The explosion lit up the sky. The hive core collapsed inward, then exploded outward in a burst of fire and organic debris. The shockwave knocked Taeyang and his Marines to the ground. When they looked back, the entire complex was gone. In its place was a massive crater. More importantly, all around them, swarm warriors were faltering. Without the hive core to coordinate them, they were confused, directionless. They stopped their organized attacks and began fighting individually. "All units," Taeyang said into the communication channel. "The core is down. Repeat, the hive core is destroyed. Coalition forces, push forward now while they are disorganized." In orbit, General Vexer stared at his tactical screen in disbelief. The Terran team had done it. 100 Marines, reduced to 43 survivors, had destroyed a target that his entire fleet could not touch. "All ships," he said slowly. "Advance. Support the Terran ground team. Get them out of there." Sora's voice came over the channel. "Negative, General. My people do not need rescue. They have another target already." "What?" "Captain Taeyang," Sora said. "What is your status?" "Tired, Admiral. 43 effectives. Limited ammunition. But we have identified 2 more hive cores in this region, requesting permission to continue operations." Hyejin could not believe what she was hearing. They just fought through an army. They destroyed an impossible target. And they want to do it again? Sora smiled. It was not a nice smile. That is what Terrans do. We do not stop when it is hard. We stop when we are done, or when we are dead. Usually the latter. Permission granted, Captain, Sora said. Hit them again. Make them remember why they should fear us. On the ground, Taeyang looked at his exhausted, wounded team. They were covered in burns and blood. Half of them could barely stand. But when he gave the order to move out, every single one of them started walking. They had 2 more hive cores to destroy. After that, maybe 3 more. The mission was not complete. So they kept going. In the command center, General Vexer watched the small blue cluster move deeper into enemy territory, moving toward another impossible target, moving forward when any sane army would retreat. He finally understood what the old records had tried to explain. Terrans did not fight like other species. They fought like the universe itself had personally offended them. They fought like surrender was a word in a language they did not speak. And the Void Swarm was learning too late that some enemies could not be beaten by numbers or adaptation. Some enemies simply refused to lose. The news spread across Coalition space like wildfire. A small Terran force had destroyed 3 hive cores in 2 days. They had broken the swarm's hold on Kryn's hope. 2 billion refugees had been saved. The impossible had happened. Within a week, every military commander in the Coalition wanted Terran advisors. Every fleet wanted Terran tactics. The old protocols about honorable warfare were quietly forgotten. Survival mattered more than pride, but copying Terran methods without understanding them led to disaster. Commander Subin learned this the hard way. She was a pilot from the Valexian military, one of the Coalition's elite species. Her people had never known defeat in 3,000 years. They were proud. They were skilled. They were supremely confident. That confidence died on a burning moon called Keswick 7. Subin led a squadron of 12 fighters on what should have been a simple mission. Intelligence reported a small swarm nest. The plan was to hit it hard and fast, using the direct insertion tactics the Terrans had demonstrated. Drop fast, strike hard, get out. They dropped fast. The strike was hard. They never got out. The swarm was waiting. The nest was not small. It was a trap. Within minutes, 11 of Subin's fighters were destroyed. She barely escaped, her ship trailing fire and smoke. She crashed in a desert canyon far from any Coalition forces. Her radio was dead. Her weapons were damaged. She was alone. That was when she met Corporal Hanul. He appeared like a ghost, wearing Terran armor covered in sand and blood. Scars crossed his face like a map of old battles. He was part of a reconnaissance team that had been operating behind enemy lines for 3 weeks. You are the pilot who tried the fancy drop maneuver, Hanul said. It was not a question. Subin's pride flared despite her situation. I followed Terran tactics exactly. No, you followed what you thought were Terran tactics. Come with me. Swarm scouts are 2 kilometers behind you. Hanul led her through the canyon to a hidden camp where 5 other Terran soldiers waited. They looked exhausted, filthy, and completely calm about their situation. How long have you been here? Subin asked. 23 days, Hanul said, checking her injuries. We dropped into scout swarm positions. Radio got destroyed on day 2. Extraction is not coming, so we keep working. For 23 days, without support? That is the job. Hanul finished bandaging her arm. Your mistake was thinking tactics are just moves you copy. The drop insertion works because we train for it constantly, because we know how to adapt when it goes wrong, because we expect it to go wrong. Over the next week, Subin stayed with Hanul's team. She watched them work. They moved at night, gathered intelligence, avoided direct combat when possible. When they had to fight, they fought smart. They used traps. They used the terrain. They attacked from unexpected angles. I thought Terrans charged into battle, Subin said one night. Hanul laughed quietly. People think we are crazy. We are not. We are practical. Sometimes the right move is to charge forward. Sometimes it is to hide and wait. Sometimes it is to run away and try again later. We do what works. Then why does everyone think you fight without fear? We do fight without fear, another soldier named Bora said. She was cleaning her weapon by the small fire. But fear and caution are different. We are not afraid to die, but we are not stupid about it. Dead soldiers do not complete missions. On the 8th day, they found a Coalition patrol that could take Subin home. Hanul walked her to the pickup point. What will you do? Subin asked. Your mission was supposed to last 2 weeks. It has been almost a month. Keep going until we run out of ammunition or the war ends, Hanul said. Probably the ammunition. You could come back with me. Request extraction, Hanul shook his head. We have good intelligence positions here. The mission is not finished. So we stay. Subin looked at him. This scarred, tired soldier, who had been behind enemy lines for a month and had no intention of leaving. Why do you do this? Because people need protecting, Hanul said simply. That is what soldiers do. That is all we do. Everything else is just details. When Subin returned to Coalition Command, she submitted a request. She wanted to train with the Terrans. Really train, not just learn their tactics but understand their mindset. General Vexer approved it immediately. The Coalition needed officers who truly understood the Terran way of war. Meanwhile, Admiral Sora faced a different challenge. The Coalition wanted to use Terran tactics across all their forces. They wanted to copy everything. Fast insertions, aggressive attacks, total war. They will get themselves killed, Taeyang said during a command meeting. They are getting killed anyway, Sora replied. At least this way they are trying something new. It is not about trying something new. It is about understanding why we do what we do. Taeyang pulled up casualty reports. Coalition forces attempting Terran tactics had suffered heavy losses. They see us charge forward and they think that is all we do. They do not see the preparation, the training, the backup plans. They think courage is enough. Sora nodded slowly. Then we need to teach them properly. Captain, I am assigning you to Coalition Command as Chief Training Officer. Take whoever you need. Build a real training program. Taeyang knew what that meant. Instead of fighting the swarm, he would spend months teaching Coalition soldiers how to fight. It felt like a waste. But orders were orders. The first training class had 200 students from 12 different species. They came expecting to learn exotic tactics and advanced techniques. What they got was basic training. Terran basic training. On the first day, Taeyang had them run an obstacle course. Half of them failed. On the second day, he had them practice basic squad movements. They moved like individuals instead of units. On the third day, he made them fight hand-to-hand in zero gravity. Most of them could not handle it. This is humiliating, one officer complained. We are experienced soldiers. We do not need basic training. You are experienced in coalition warfare, Taeyang said. That is why you are losing. Strip away everything you know. Start from the beginning. Learn to think like a soldier who expects to be outnumbered, outgunned, and surrounded. Then learn to win anyway. It took 3 months. 3 months of brutal training, constant drills, and lessons taught in blood and sweat. But slowly the coalition soldiers began to change. They learned to move as units. They learned to adapt when plans failed. They learned that retreat was sometimes the smartest move. Most importantly, they learned that war was not about glory. It was about making the hard choices and living with them. While Taeyang trained coalition forces, the war continued. The swarm adapted to Terran tactics. They learned to defend their hive cores better. They learned to counter direct insertions. They were learning, but the Terrans were learning too. Admiral Sora watched the strategic situation develop. The swarm had pulled back from several systems, consolidating their forces. That meant they were preparing for something big. They are going to hit the coalition capital system, she told her command staff. They want to cut off the head. When? Captain Daehyun asked. Soon, maybe days. We need to prepare. Across coalition space, forces gathered. Every ship that could fly. Every soldier who could fight. This would be the decisive battle. If the capital fell, the coalition fell. If the coalition fell, the Terrans would face the swarm alone. Subin, now a lieutenant after her time training with the Terrans, stood on the bridge of her new command. A small frigate with a crew that had completed Terran tactical training. They were ready, or as ready as anyone could be for what was coming. The swarm arrived 3 days later. The fleet was massive. Thousands of bioships, each one carrying thousands of warriors. They came like a dark tide blotting out the stars. The coalition fleet formed defensive lines. Standard protocol. Hold position. Make the enemy come to them. It was the smart tactical choice. Admiral Sora had other ideas. All Terran ships, she said calmly. Prepare for direct assault. We are going straight down their throat. Hee-jin, who had remained with the Terran fleet as an observer, felt her blood turn cold. Admiral, that is suicide. We are outnumbered 10 to 1. Maybe more. Yes, Sora agreed. Which is why they will not expect it. Captain Taeyang, your training classes are over. Time to show the Coalition what they learned. Taeyang smiled. It was the first time he had smiled in months. Finally, all ships form up on the flagship. We are going to teach the swarm what happens when you mess with Terra. The Coalition fleet watched in shock as the Terran ships broke formation and charged directly at the swarm fleet. 5 warships against thousands of enemies. It looked like madness. It looked like suicide. It was brilliant. Admiral Sora stood on her bridge, calm as stone. All weapons focus fire on the command carriers. Navigation, take us through their center. They are expecting us to engage their front lines. We are going for the heart. The Terran ships moved like arrows, fast and precise. They ignored the smaller swarm vessels and aimed for the massive command carriers at the center of the enemy formation. These were the ships that coordinated the swarm's attacks. Kill them, and the enemy would lose cohesion. Plasma fire lit up space as both sides opened fire. Terran shields flared and failed under the massive assault. Hull plating melted. One of the 5 ships, the destroyer called Thunderstrike, took too many hits and exploded in a ball of fire, but the other 4 kept going. Collision imminent, the navigation officer reported. Ram them, Sora ordered. The flagship crashed into a swarm command carrier at full speed. The impact sent both ships spinning. Before the swarm could react, Terran boarding pods launched. Hundreds of them carrying Marines directly onto the enemy ship. Captain Taeyang led the first wave. His pod smashed through the organic hull of the swarm carrier, and his team poured out into alien corridors. The inside of a swarm ship was like being inside a living creature. Walls pulsed. The air was thick and hot. Everything was designed to be hostile to invaders, perfect for Terrans who trained in hostile environments. Move fast, Taeyang shouted. Find the command node and destroy it. We have 10 minutes before this ship's immune system kills us all. His team ran through the twisted corridors, fighting swarm defenders at every turn. The aliens were strong and fast, but they were not prepared for close-quarters combat with humans. Terrans had practiced fighting in spaces too small to use most weapons. They used knives, clubs, and their own bodies as weapons. Sergeant Yunji kicked open a door and threw an explosive charge into the room beyond. The explosion shook the ship. Through the smoke, she could see the command node, a massive organic brain that controlled the carrier's functions. Plant the charges, Taeyang ordered. His team worked quickly. They had practiced this drill hundreds of times. Place explosives at key points, set the timer, get out before detonation. In training, they had minutes. In reality, they had seconds. Charges set, Yunji reported. 90 seconds to detonation. Fall back to the boarding pods. Go, 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 they ran. Behind them, swarm warriors pursued. The ship itself seemed to fight them, walls closing, floors becoming unstable. 2 Marines did not make it. They were cut off by closing passages and overwhelmed. Taeyang made the call immediately. Seal the section. Keep moving. It was the hardest order a commander could give. Leave people behind, but standing still meant everyone died. Moving forward meant some survived. The math was brutal and simple. The survivors reached their pods and launched just as the charges detonated. The swarm command carrier split in half, spilling wreckage and bodies into space. All across the battlefield, Terran teams were doing the same thing. Boarding enemy ships, fighting through impossible odds, destroying command nodes. Some teams succeeded, some teams died trying. But every command carrier they destroyed weakened the swarm's coordination. In the Coalition fleet, General Vexer watched the tactical display update. The swarm formation was breaking apart. Without central coordination, individual ships were acting independently. They were still dangerous, but they were no longer an unstoppable force. All Coalition ships, Vexer said slowly. Advance. Support the Terran assault. Show them they do not fight alone. The Coalition fleet surged forward. Ships that had trained under Terran officers moved with new purpose. They did not fight like they had before. They fought like they had something to prove. Lieutenant Subin led her frigate into the heart of the battle. Her crew moved with precision they had not possessed before training. When a swarm fighter damaged their engines, they did not retreat. They used maneuvering thrusters to position themselves and kept fighting. When ammunition ran low, they improvised using debris as projectiles. This is insane, her second officer said. No, Subin replied, thinking of Corporal Hanul and his team surviving behind enemy lines for a month. This is what soldiers do. We fight until we cannot fight anymore, and then we fight a little more. The battle raged for 6 hours. Ships exploded. Stations burned. The space around the Coalition capital became a graveyard of metal and flesh. But slowly, impossibly, the Coalition forces were winning. Admiral Sora stood among the wreckage of her bridge. A hit had killed half her crew and destroyed most of the ship's systems. They were drifting, unable to maneuver, but she was still giving orders. All remaining Terran ships continue the assault. Do not slow down because we are damaged. The mission is not complete. Admiral, Hygiene said from her observer station. She had stayed throughout the entire battle, refusing to evacuate. Your ship is dying. You need to abandon it. Not until the swarm is broken, Sora said calmly. Another impact shook the ship. Alarms screamed. Fire spread through the lower decks. But Sora stood firm, directing the battle, refusing to quit. That was when the swarm made their final move. A massive queen ship, larger than anything they had deployed before, emerged from the center of their fleet. It was the true command center, the brain of the entire swarm force in this system. That is our target, Taiyang said from his position on a half-destroyed boarding vessel. He looked at the 15 Marines still alive from his original team of 100. We need to board that ship and kill the queen. Captain, that is impossible, one of his officers said. We do not have the numbers. We do not have the equipment. We barely have a functional ship. Then it will be difficult, Taiyang said. Difficult, not impossible. Prepare for boarding action. What was left of the Terran boarding force made one final push. They launched at the queen ship from multiple angles, knowing most would not make it. Swarm defenders filled the space around their target with fire. Taiyang's pod was one of 3 that reached the hull. 9 Marines total, against a ship carrying thousands of enemies. Against a queen that had conquered entire systems, they went in anyway. The inside of the queen ship was worse than the command carriers. It was a living nightmare of organic technology and hostile environments. The walls tried to trap them. The air tried to poison them. Every step forward was earned in blood, but they kept moving. Sergeant Yunji took a hit that tore through her armor. She fell, gasping. Keep going, she said. Do not stop for me. Not leaving you, Taiyang said. Not asking, ordering. She smiled through bloody teeth. Terra endures, Captain. Make sure it does. She triggered the grenade on her belt. The explosion bought them time to escape. It also collapsed the corridor, sealing her inside with dozens of swarm warriors. The remaining 7 Marines reached the Queen's chamber. It was massive, a cathedral of flesh and technology, and in the center, the Queen herself. A creature of terrible beauty and power, she looked at them with eyes that held intelligence and hatred. We are so small, one Marine whispered. How do we kill something like that? One piece at a time, Taiyang said. Spread out. Hit the support structures. Bring this whole room down on her if we have to. They fought with everything they had. Weapons, explosives, their own bodies. One by one, the Marines fell. Killed by the Queen's defenders. Crushed by falling debris. Dissolved by alien acids. When there were only 2 Marines left, Taiyang and a private named Hyun, they were out of ammunition and surrounded. We failed, Hyun said. Not yet. Taiyang looked up at the ceiling, at the massive organic supports holding it up. They had damaged them, but not enough to cause a collapse. Give me your explosive pack. Sir, there is not enough charge to— There is if someone stays to place it properly. Taiyang took the pack. Get to the extraction point. Tell Admiral Sora that the mission is complete. But Captain, that is an order, Private. Go. Hyun ran. Taiyang climbed up toward the ceiling supports, placing charges with careful precision. The Queen's warriors came at him. He fought them off with his knife, with his fists, with his teeth. He fought until he could not fight anymore. And then he triggered the charges. The ceiling came down. The Queen died. The ship died. And Captain Taiyang died with them. But the mission was complete. In orbit, the swarm fleet faltered. Their queen was dead. Their coordination was gone. The remaining ships began to scatter, fleeing into deep space. The coalition had won. 3 months later, a monument was unveiled on Altheon Prime. The world had been rebuilt from the ashes. Cities rose from the ruins. Life returned to the dead zones. And in the center of the capital, they erected a statue. It showed a human soldier walking forward through flames, one hand reaching back to pull a fallen comrade to safety. The face was Captain Taeyang's. The inscription read, "They called us old legends, myths of a bygone age. But legends never die. They wait in the darkness, ready to walk into the fire when the galaxy needs them most." Terra endures. Admiral Sora stood at the dedication ceremony. She was one of the few senior Terran officers to survive the battle. Beside her stood Hyejin, now a full admiral in the Coalition fleet.